Hey guys, it's Mathwell here once again with a follow-up video on the Ethereal Knives Nimis plus Blade Blast Inquisitor. At this stage, he's taken on all content and done it in a very decisive fashion. It is pretty much build of the league, and yeah, it's gonna be impossible to top it in the next one build before Diablo 4 comes out. So unless I come back and keep playing some more stuff at some point during this league, this definitely was the strongest character of the league. And that is largely because of Nimis, because it is still very powerful, especially with Ethereal Knives. So once you attack or cast once, your projectiles come back, giving you a double hit, essentially meaning that Ethereal Knives, under the right conditions, hits twice as much as it normally should. But it also enables Blade Blast, and I, after having tested throughout the endgame, can say that it's fairly worth having. You could easily do an EK build like we've done in the past without Blade Blast, and it would be absolutely fine. If I didn't have Blade Blast in this build, it would still perform very well, but it is a nice button to have to amp up your damage even more. So once you cast a few times with EK, you'll have a lot of blades at your feet. You press Blade Blast, and it does do a significant amount of damage. I can't really quantify it, and I can't really tell how worth it is pressing, but it's definitely noticeable. And you can see that typically during a boss fight, EK is going to be doing a lot of these chunks of damage, and then once I press Blade Blast, a lot of smaller hits come in over the next second or so, and it just kind of ramps and lets me go back to pressing EK and doing a bunch of damage once again. So it is good. I'm not sure how good, but it's definitely something, and I did not actually end up trying it on single target with Arcanist brand, which was my original plan, just because casting it once every now and again, once I've collected some blades, seemed to be enough, as opposed to nerfing its damage with Arcanist brand and then having it constantly try and tick by itself. I didn't end up trying that, so I don't know if it was really worth it. I was just satisfied with the way I was pressing it manually. So you can see throughout a lot of this content, I also don't press Righteous Fire because it's entirely unnecessary. At this stage of the character, my damage is pretty overkill, so the EK does maybe something like 20 to 30 million DPS without Righteous Fire. And then if you press Blade Blast as well, it does even more, on top of that. But you can then press Righteous Fire for 40% more damage, but it is at the cost of a lot of your life regen and a lot of your ES regen, which means it's going to be tougher to recover, but in many cases it, doesn't really matter. So this is a Fid, for example. Everything gets damn near 2-shot or some shit, and even with Righteous Fire, it could take some damage and some degen and all that. So for all the actual proper endgame content, like the Ubers, I was typically pressing Righteous Fire, even though if you want to be a bit safer, you definitely could get away without pressing it, but it's pretty worth doing. So, for example, the start of this Uber Maven Shaper, don't have Righteous Fire up, just run around waiting till I can get a good damage setup going, because, yeah, if you go with this sort of a build and you want to make sure you're maximizing your damage, you turn yourself into a bit of a melee character, since the place that you're going to get your blades for Blade Blast from is going to be at your feet. You want to be basically standing on top of a boss. That's the one big downside if you really care about the Blade Blast. Otherwise, EK can still be pretty ranged even with Nimis and the AoE thing. You still would typically rather be right next to a boss, because with the randomly shoot proj thing, if you're a bit further away, you can actually miss, like with your random projectiles, unless you've got a lot of projectiles. And we've got 14 or something, but it's still random, and you will still sometimes miss your enemy using the random projectiles if you're at a bit of a distance. So yeah, we turn into a bit of a melee character, but it's not a big deal if you have infinite damage. That's typically where melee characters sometimes don't perform as well because they have to go melee, but then they don't make up for it with damage. So then you're left having a worse playstyle with some mediocre damage. So you can see the output of the build, once things go well, is pretty insane. With Righteous Fire, it's probably something like 30 to 40 to 50 million DPS. Really hard to quantify, but yeah, there's that. And then also Blade Blast that you can press sometimes. I farmed basically all of the Uber content with all of the stuff I had. Got a Woke Multi-Strike as my one big drop for all of this stuff, which sold for 19 divines. But yeah, I used all of the fragments and stuff that I had for Uber content and did it really quickly. And then once you're standing there with no more Uber content, you're just like, what do I do now? That was actually a bit too easy. And that's typically why I don't particularly like having such a strong character. I do want a bit of a struggle here or there, or some, slower gameplay. But it's fun to still perform with a nice character every now and again as well. I did take my business over to Simulacrum, and I did not think it would be particularly good, and it's not great because I don't have huge amounts of defense, which Simulacrum, you either overpower it by like hundreds of millions of DPS or some shit, or you have a good, well-balanced character that has good DPS and some good defenses. It did, however, still go up to wave 30, and it was actually surprisingly decent, largely because of freeze. So this character did have a good portion of freeze in it, and if waves were immune to freeze, it was terrible. If they weren't immune to freeze, we could take our time and actually get through it all right. So I got to wave 30 being kind of careless. I think it's definitely doable at wave 30, but it's not the best for it. I also then tried out to Hall of Grandmasters. A good Inquisitor is typically pretty good at Hall of Grandmasters because it ignores elemental resists, and then that means you can one-shot a lot of things. So got through it, dying once to the typical Putrefy Lightning Strike cut, and that was about it. It was pretty clean otherwise. Came back in, killed him, and took on all content, and this character I think is undeniably build of the league. So Ethereal Knives, pretty damn good, comboed with Nimis, can make Blade Blast good. All in all, Nimis still good, Blade Blast EK, very nice. So up to you guys what you do with that information. Thank you very much for watching, see you guys next time.